People always say that family is supposed to be your safe place, the one circle in life where you'll always be accepted. But for me, family was nothing more than a cage, built from favoritism, filled with cruelty, and locked tight with the word loser. My name is Claire, and for years, I carried the very people who despised me. I was the one quietly paying the bills, keeping the roof over their heads, making sure the lights stayed on, and the debts didn't swallow them whole. But did they ever thank me? Did they ever see me?
No.
Instead, they worshipped my younger sister, Melissa, like she was royalty, showering her with gifts and praise, while I was treated like an afterthought. The breaking point came one Christmas. I wasn't invited to dinner. My mother's words over the phone were sharp enough to cut skin. "There's no place for losers at our table." Then she hung up. I thought I'd collapse. I thought I'd cry. But instead, I smiled. For the first time in my life, I understood the truth. They needed me more than I ever needed them. That night, as they sat beneath a sparkling tree and handed Melissa a $50,000 watch, I made my decision. I would stay silent. I would walk away. And I would stop carrying the weight of people who never cared if I fell. What they didn't know was that the bills they ignored, the debts they pretended didn't exist, were about to come crashing down on them, without me there to save them. And within minutes of my decision, the same family who had shut me out came running to my door, their faces streaked with tears, begging for the very help they had once mocked me for giving. That was the night I stopped being their shadow. That was the night I finally became free. My name is Claire, and I'm 32 years old. For as long as I can remember, my family has treated me like I was nothing more than a shadow in my own home. My younger sister, Melissa, has always been the golden child, the one showered with praise, money, and gifts, while I was constantly labeled the failure, or, as my mother liked to call me, the loser. Every holiday was the same. The house would sparkle with decorations, laughter would fill the rooms, and Melissa would walk around in expensive dresses that my parents had bought her. Meanwhile, I'd be the one quietly paying the bills, making sure the lights stayed on and the heat didn't shut off in the middle of winter. My family never acknowledged it, and I never demanded recognition. Part of me believed that maybe if I kept helping, they would finally see my worth. But Christmas that year was different. It wasn't just another slight or offhand insult. It was open humiliation. I found out through a distant cousin's social media post that my parents were hosting a grand Christmas dinner. Everyone in the family was there, except me. When I called to ask why I hadn't been invited, my mother's voice was cold and sharp. "There's no place for losers at this table, Claire. You wouldn't fit in." Then she hung up. The words stung, but oddly, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just sat there in silence, staring at my phone, and a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in my life, I felt the power shift. They thought they had humiliated me, but deep down I knew something they didn't. Their entire lifestyle was being kept alive because of me. The mortgage payments, the credit card bills, even the groceries, they all came from my pocket. Later that night, I scrolled through more pictures. There they were, smiling around a giant Christmas tree, holding glasses of champagne. My father looked proud as he handed Melissa a small velvet box. She opened it with exaggerated excitement, and inside was a glittering $50,000 designer watch. Applause filled the room. I didn't get angry. I didn't scream. I didn't even send a message. Instead, I smiled quietly to myself. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and decided that was the last bill I would ever pay for them. What happened next shocked even me. Minutes later, as I sat in my small apartment sipping tea, I heard frantic pounding on my door. When I opened it, my parents stood outside, faces pale, eyes red, tears streaming down their cheeks. The same people who had called me a loser just hours before were now pleading for my help. Growing up in my family felt like living in two separate worlds under the same roof. My sister Melissa lived in sunlight, while I was left in the shadows. She was the star, the miracle child who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was treated like a mistake they couldn't erase. I still remember being 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with my report card clutched in my hands. I had gotten straight A's, something I was proud of. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's good," he muttered and went back to reading. 10 minutes later, Melissa came skipping in, waving a paper with a B+ on it. My mother gasped like she had just witnessed a miracle. She hugged Melissa, kissed her forehead, and called her the smartest girl in the world. I stood there, holding my perfect report card, invisible. That's how it always was. Birthdays? Melissa got parties with balloons, cakes, and expensive gifts. I got a store-bought card and maybe a sweater if they remembered. Vacations? Melissa got new outfits and pocket money, while I was told to make do with last year's clothes. I thought, maybe when I grow older, things will change. But they didn't. They got worse. When I graduated from college, I was offered a modest job that paid enough to get by. Melissa didn't bother finishing school. She spent her days shopping, posting selfies, and bragging about her lifestyle. The irony was that her lifestyle was built on money that wasn't hers. My parents enabled it, paying for her rent, her car, even her weekend trips. And when their funds began to dry up, they turned to me. It started small. "Claire, can you cover the electricity bill this month? Your father's check is late." Then it was, "Can you pay the mortgage this time? We'll pay you back." Of course, they never did. Soon, it wasn't even a request, it became an expectation. And I gave in. Every single time. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was hope that one day they'd finally see me. Maybe it was just habit. I told myself I was doing the right thing, helping my family. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was being used. The cruelest part was how they twisted it. Instead of being grateful, they mocked me. "If you made more money, maybe you wouldn't be single," my mother once said as she handed me another bill. My father laughed. Melissa chimed in, "Don't be jealous just because mom and dad love me more." And yet every month I paid. I kept the house running, their credit intact, their precious golden child floating in comfort. So when they told me there was no place for losers at Christmas dinner, it was almost laughable. I was the one keeping the lights on, the one paying for the food they ate, the one making sure Melissa could parade around in her designer clothes. I had been their foundation for years. And on that Christmas night, I finally decided to let the foundation crumble. When my mother told me over the phone that Christmas dinner was no place for losers, I expected the words to slice through me like they always had. But instead, something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, yes, but it didn't control me anymore. I felt something different, clarity. I hung up without arguing. In the past, I would have begged for a seat at the table, desperate to prove I was worthy of their love. This time, I simply smiled to myself. For years, I had carried them on my back, bleeding my paychecks dry to make sure they never felt the sting of struggle. And how did they repay me? By calling me a burden, a loser, an embarrassment. That night, I poured myself a glass of tea and sat in the glow of my small Christmas tree. It wasn't grand or glittering like the one at my parents' house, but it was mine. Every ornament was one I had picked out. Every light was one I had strung with my own 2 hands. It may not have been perfect, but it was real, something my family could never understand. As I sipped my tea, I thought about all the bills I had paid for them. Thousands upon thousands of dollars gone. Rent, mortgages, utilities, even Melissa's shopping splurges. They had called me a loser while living off the money I earned. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then I made my decision. No more. No more checks quietly slipped under the door. No more emergency transfers. No more late-night calls begging me to save them from their own irresponsibility. That part of my life ended tonight. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even send them a text. Instead, I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. There was something liberating about it. For once, I wasn't the weak one clinging to their approval. I was the one holding the power, and I had just chosen to walk away from them. On my laptop, I scrolled through pictures posted from their dinner. Melissa was at the center of attention, showing off the $50,000 watch on her wrist as though it were a crown jewel. My parents beamed like they had given the world to a queen. I should have felt jealous, maybe even bitter. But all I felt was peace. Because I knew the truth. When the bills came due, Melissa's watch wouldn't pay them. Their pride wouldn't keep the lights on. And when the weight of their world came crashing down, they would realize who had been holding it up all along. And that realization was coming sooner than they thought. The morning after Christmas, I woke up with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. No guilt, no dread, no racing thoughts about how I was going to cover my parents' bills again. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying their weight. It was strangely quiet, as if the universe had finally gone still after years of noise. But that calm didn't last long. By early afternoon, my phone started buzzing. First, a text from my mother. "Claire, call me back immediately. This is serious." Then another. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering?" I ignored them, sipping my coffee and watching the snow fall outside my window. Not an hour later, my father tried. His message was blunt. "We need you. Call back. Now." Again, I stayed silent. For once, I didn't feel obligated to rush to their rescue. Instead, I let their panic simmer. Later that evening, I checked my emails. There it was, overdue notices from the bank. The mortgage had bounced. The credit cards were maxed. Their utilities were flagged for shutoff. I hadn't paid a single one of them this month, and for the first time, they were feeling what it meant to live without my support. The realization must have hit them like a sledgehammer. All those years of living above their means, all those luxuries they had flaunted, it was all built on my quiet sacrifices. Without me, their empire crumbled overnight. And then came the moment I had been expecting. Just as I was settling into bed, I heard frantic knocking at my apartment door. Not the polite kind, but heavy, urgent pounding that echoed through the hallway. My heart raced, though not from fear. I knew exactly who it was. When I opened the door, I was met with a sight I will never forget. My mother stood there, her mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching my father's arm as if she might collapse. My father's proud, stern face was gone, replaced by raw panic. "Claire," my mother choked out, her voice breaking. "Please, we need your help." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to reach for my hands. My father, usually so commanding, looked smaller than I had ever seen him. "The bank is threatening foreclosure," he said, his voice cracking. "The cards, the bills, we can't." He stopped mid-sentence, swallowing hard. "We need you." I just stood there in the doorway, silent. The very same parents who had excluded me from their dinner, who had mocked me as a loser, who had paraded Melissa around like royalty, were now standing outside my door, stripped of their pride, begging. For years, they had told me I wasn't enough. Now, they were admitting, without even saying the words, that I was the only one who had ever been enough. And as they pleaded, a part of me almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The hallway outside my apartment felt colder than the December night air. My parents stood there trembling, not from the chill, but from panic. For once, they weren't draped in confidence or pride. They looked ordinary, human, and terrified. "Claire, please," my mother whispered, clutching at my arm as if she were drowning. "The bank said they'll freeze our accounts. Melissa's rent is due. We can't manage this without you. Without me." The words hung in the air like smoke. My father, usually the loudest voice in any room, could barely meet my eyes. "I know we've said things," he muttered. "We didn't mean them. We were upset. You know how families are." His voice cracked at the end, betraying the desperation he was trying so hard to hide. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just let them squirm in the silence, their words echoing back at me. No place for losers. That was less than 24 hours ago. Yet here they were, at my door, tears streaming down their faces, begging the loser to save them. Melissa wasn't with them, of course. I imagined her at home, still admiring that $50,000 watch, completely unaware, or unwilling to admit, that without me, it was just a shiny piece of metal destined to be pawned off when reality hit. I stepped back slightly, crossing my arms over my chest. "Funny," I said quietly, my tone steady. "Last night there wasn't a place for me at your table. But tonight, there's a place for me at your doorstep." What changed? My mother flinched. "We were wrong," she stammered. "We shouldn't have said that. We didn't mean it." I tilted my head. Didn't mean it? Or didn't mean for me to finally stop paying your way? Neither of them answered. My father's jaw tightened, his pride fighting against his desperation. He looked at the ground instead of my face. The power I felt in that moment was like nothing I had ever known. Not loud, not cruel, just quiet certainty. For once, they needed me more than I needed them. "You've lived your whole lives pretending I was nothing," I said softly. "And yet, without me, everything you built falls apart in less than a day. Do you realize how pathetic that is?" My mother broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. My father finally looked up, his eyes red. "Please, Claire. We can't lose the house. Not now. Not like this." I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. "You lost me years ago. The house. That's on you." I closed the door slowly, their cries muffled as the lock clicked shut. My heart was steady, my hands calm. For once, I wasn't the child begging for love. They were the ones begging, and I was finally free. When the door clicked shut, the silence inside my apartment felt different than it ever had before. For years, silence had been heavy with loneliness, filled with the echo of words like loser and failure. But tonight, that same silence felt like freedom. I stood still for a moment, listening to their muffled cries fade down the hallway. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel obligated. I didn't feel like I was abandoning them. Instead, I realized the truth I had been running from for years. I had never owed them anything. Every bill I paid, every sacrifice I made, it had been my desperate attempt to earn love that was never going to exist. They hadn't just taken my money, they had taken my self-worth and twisted it into something they could trample on. And I had let them. But not anymore. That night, I pulled out a notebook I had been keeping tucked away for months. It was full of goals I had written down but never chased, travel plans, career ideas, even small things like learning to paint or saving for a car of my own. Every time I had tried to move forward, I had been dragged back by another phone call from my parents asking for money. That cycle was broken now. In the days that followed, the messages kept coming. Some were pleading, "Claire, we're drowning. Please, just this one time." Others were angry. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I didn't respond to a single one. I blocked their numbers, their emails, even their social media. For once, my boundaries were firm. Melissa tried once, too. She called from a blocked number, her voice dripping with the same arrogance she'd always carried. "You can't really think you're better than us now, Claire. You're still nothing." I almost laughed. "Funny," I told her, "because without me, you're the one who has nothing." Then I hung up. That was the last time I heard her voice. I wasn't naive. I knew their downfall would be messy. Maybe they'd lose the house. Maybe Melissa's shiny watch would end up at a pawn shop. Maybe the family that had mocked me would finally feel the sting of reality. But that wasn't my concern anymore. For once, I wasn't their safety net. One evening, as I sat by my small Christmas tree, I whispered the words I had wished someone had told me years ago. "You're enough." I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I had survived without it my whole life, and now I was thriving because of it. The last words my parents had said to me were, "There's no place for losers." But as I looked around my quiet apartment, the bills paid on time, the lights warm, the air calm, I realized they were right. There was no place for losers in my life anymore. And I had finally walked away from the ones who were.